In the fall of 1918, the deadliest pandemic in recorded history was killing 10,000 Americans a week. Two groups of doctors were treating the exact same disease. One group had a death rate of 3 in every 100. The other had a death rate of 6 in 10,000. The group with the vastly superior survival rate was not using the new pharmaceutical wonder drug. They were using a weed from the swamp. Within 20 years of that pandemic, the United States government made sure no licensed physician would ever be trained to use it again. But here is what no one asks. If it worked that well, why have you never heard of it? The answer involves a man who was not a doctor, a foundation with a financial interest in the outcome, and a single report that rewrote American medicine in a decade. You will understand exactly how it happened before this vault closes. This is the story of America's most aggressively erased fever medicine and the men who buried it. Welcome to Sunlight Sprouts. The archive opens in a wetland meadow along the eastern seaboard sometime in the 1600s. A group of Iroquois healers are harvesting a tall perennial plant from the edge of a stream. Its paired leaves clasp the stem so tightly they appear to grow straight through it, as if fused to the stalk. White flower clusters crown each stalk in late summer, drawing clouds of bees and butterflies. The Iraqi, the Cherokee, the Mohegan, the Menominee, the Delaware. More than a dozen nations, different names for the same plant. One shared purpose, the fever that felt like your bones were breaking. They called that fever break fever. We call it Denny. And the plant that stopped it, that broke the fever and brought a man back from the edge, was Upomatum. Bone set. European settlers learned it from indigenous healers within a generation. By the early 1800s, a brutal strain of influenza swept the East Coast. Deep chills, a grinding, aching pain that felt like the bones themselves were fracturing. A physician named C.J. Hempel documented in his journal that this plant so singularly relieved the disease that it was familiarly called bone set among the sick. The name stuck. By the Civil War, soldiers packed it into their field kits alongside their ammunition. Farms kept bundles of dried bone hanging from the rafters, the way families now keep aspirin in the medicine cabinet. It was as routine as firewood, as trusted as salt. It belonged to anyone who could reach a wetland meadow. This is exactly why it had to go. In the mid-1800s, a new school of medicine was growing in America. They called themselves electics, a name from the Greek meaning to choose from. Their philosophy was simple: treat the whole person, use what works, do no harm. They drew from Native American plant knowledge, from European herbal traditions, and from African healers in the South. They built licensed medical schools across the country, and they trained thousands of physicians. At the height of their influence in the 1880s, 1 in 5 American doctors was an eclectic. Their most celebrated pharmacist was a man named John Uri Lloyd. He ran a botanical medicines company in Cincinnati called Lloyd Brothers. He invented extraction techniques so precise that the pharmaceutical industry eventually borrowed them. He was awarded the Remington Medal, the highest honor in American pharmacy. And the medicines he sold most, the ones eclectic physicians prescribed above all others, were plant-based. Bone set was among his staples, but the machinery to destroy them had already been set in motion. In 1908, the American Medical Association asked the Carnegie Foundation to survey every medical school in the United States and Canada. The Carnegie Foundation hired Abraham Flexner, a man who had never practiced medicine, who held no medical degree, and who had spent his career as an educator of boys. Flexner visited 155 medical schools. He did not test their outcomes. He did not compare their patient survival rates. He evaluated their laboratories, their equipment, and their alignment with a German university model built around pharmaceutical science. In 1910, he published his verdict: homeopathic schools, quacks; naturopathic schools, quacks; eclectic schools, quacks, all of them dismissed as charlatanism. all of them recommended for closure. Flexner stated openly that he aimed to antagonize these medical traditions, not challenge, antagonize. The eclectics had treated patients across 6 decades of epidemics. They had documented their outcomes in peer-reviewed journals. None of that evidence was examined. None of it was refuted. It was simply declared irrelevant by a man with no medical training, backed by the AMA and Carnegie Foundation money and written into law through state licensing boards one by one. Then came the test neither side had asked for. In the spring of 1918, a new strain of influenza emerged from military training camps. By fall, the second wave arrived, and it was catastrophic. Healthy young men and women were dying within 48 hours of the first symptoms. Hospitals overflowed. Morgues ran out of space. Cities banned public gatherings. Families buried their dead in backyards because the cemeteries could not keep pace. The Surgeon General reached for the new wonder drug. On October 5, 1918, the Journal of the American Medical Association published its recommendation. Aspirin at doses of 1,000 ml every 3 hours. That is the equivalent of nearly 25 standard aspirin tablets in a single day. The US Navy followed and the Army followed. Bayer had lost its American aspirin patent in 1917 and was flooding the market with advertising. Now the government was their sales force. Sales doubled. Eclectic physicians did not use it. They used bone-set puracy root galsmium and the full botanical material Medicica their tradition had built over 75 years. One eclectic physician in Virginia documented treating 200 consecutive influenza patients with botanical protocols. Not one died. In March 1919, John Uri Lloyd's company surveyed 1,000 eclectic physicians about their outcomes during the pandemic. What those physicians reported was remarkable. Eclectic treatment produced a fatality rate of 6 in 1,000 patients. Conventional treatment reported a rate of 3 in every 100. The eclectics, using weeds from the swamp, lost 5 times fewer patients. In 2009, physician Dr. Karen Starko published a paper in Clinical Infectious Diseases, examining something that had gone unquestioned for 90 years. She argued that the aspirin doses recommended by JAMA in October 1918 were toxic. At those levels, the drug flooded the lungs with fluid and caused pulmonary edema. The wet, hemorrhagic lungs described in early autopsy reports and the drowning deaths that made the 1918 flu unlike anything before, it were consistent with salicylate poisoning. Aspirin advertisements ran in August 1918. Official recommendations appeared in September and in early October 1918. The death spike followed in October 1918. Stark's paper is a documented hypothesis, not a verdict. The question it raises has never been satisfactorily answered. The eclectics' herbs did not drown anyone. By 1939, the last eclectic medical school in Cincinnati had closed its doors. The libraries from every eclectic school in the country had been shipped there as those schools fell one by one. When herbalist Michael Moore visited that basement in 1990, he found the accumulated clinical knowledge of a century sitting in the dark, unread and unknown. The Flexner report did not just close schools, it erased a lineage of medicine from legitimate practice permanently. Now here is what the science eventually confirmed when someone finally looked. Boneset's first modern validation came not from America but from Germany. In 1981, researchers there discovered that Boneset's polysaccharides stimulate immune response at 4 times the level of Echinacea. Ecgonia, the herb Americans spend $300 million a year on, Boneset outperforms it at the cellular level. That same year, a clinical trial compared Boneset preparations directly to aspirin for the common cold with equivalent symptom relief. A swamp plant growing wild for free, equal to the drug that had been recommended at toxic doses during the deadliest pandemic in modern history. That finding alone should have changed everything. It did not. In 2004, Researchers isolated bone set's active sesquiterpene lacones and confirmed significant anti-inflammatory activity at the cellular level, scientifically validating what the Iroquois had observed for centuries. Then came the finding that closes the circle entirely. In peer-reviewed work published in recent years, hydroalcoholic extracts of bone set showed direct inhibition of influenza, a virus, by blocking viral attachment to host cells before infection can begin, not suppressing symptoms after the fact, stopping the virus from entering in the first place. This is the mechanism the eclectic physicians were observing in 1918 without the language to describe it. It took a century to name what they already knew. You cannot patent a swamp plant. That is the problem. Harvey Wickersfelter, the great eclectic physician, wrote in his Materia Medica, "It is an admirable remedy to break up a common cold, especially when accompanied by deep-seated aching pain. In every epidemic of influenza in which it has been used, it has provided great advantage." Felt wrote those words in the 1920s. The library that holds them sits in Cincinnati. Most of the physicians who could have acted on them in the decades that followed were never trained to read it. One honest note before the close. Bone set contains compounds called pyrrolysine alkaloids. German health authorities recommend against prolonged daily use. There are no documented cases of liver damage from bone set specifically, but long-term use of concentrated extracts is not advised. The traditional preparation is short-term, a tea from dried leaves and flower tops at the first sign of fever or flu, taken for the duration of the illness and not beyond. That is how the Iroquois used it. That is how the eclectics used it across 6 decades of American epidemics. Here is what you can do right now. Bone set grows wild across eastern North America. It is easily cultivated as a native perennial. It prefers moist soil and partial sun, stream edges, rain gardens, wet meadows. It grows 3 to 5 ft tall and comes back every year without replanting. Dried leaf and flower tops are available from reputable herbal suppliers. To make the traditional preparation, steep 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried herb in 8 oz of boiling water for 15 minutes. Drink it warm 3 times daily at the very first sign of flu. It is bitter, significantly bitter. The Iroquois and the eclectic physicians both recorded that bitterness as part of its power. Your tongue knows it is medicine. The eclectics did not lose because their medicine failed. They lost because their medicine could not be owned. Bone set grew in swamps. It could not be patented. It could not be manufactured at scale and sold at markup. In a system being built entirely around pharmaceutical profit, a plant that worked for free was not a resource. It was a threat. Abraham Flexner's report removed it from legitimate practice in a single decade. It took 100 years for researchers to confirm in a laboratory what those physicians had documented across 6 decades of American epidemics. Somewhere in a wetland near you, the plant is still there. White flowers in August, paired leaves fused to the stem. It has been waiting since 1939. If this vault opened something for you, subscribe to Sunlight Sprouts and hit the bell. Every like and every share preserves what they tried to erase. The next vault opens soon.